Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Good to see everyone. Welcome everyone in the chat, moderators and or channel members out there. Today we have an amazing show for you guys with Brooke Moreland. Hold on, I got so much stuff up on the screen here. Gotta get rid of some of this stuff really quickly. Thanks for joining in. And also, if you're listening on audio only, welcome, because the show is also a podcast. Follow Raised by Giants on any and all podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and you can download the episodes on whatever podcast platform you listen to, and the show drops on those platforms immediately after it's released. We are a viewer-supported show. We don't have any sponsorships, advertising, or affiliate programs. It's just me. I do all of it. So help support the show. PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description. Also, you can send in super chats and super stickers if you'd like a question or comment to be highlighted during the show. Channel memberships are also available, and you get bonus episodes for signing up to be a channel member. And there's a huge back catalog. Click the More button underneath the title of this video to the drop down of the description. All of my links that you need are there. And also, watch my documentary, A Clockwork Shining, on Amazon Prime Video. And if you're not in the US, you can watch it on Vimeo. The link is pinned to the top of the chat and is in the description. So with all that down, this evening we have with us active Bigfoot field researcher and the creator and the host of the brand new podcast, Dark Florida, Brooke Moreland. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Happy to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on, and it's really impressive to see your transformation, like from a distance online, and the trials and tribulations that you've been through. So give the audience a little background on yourself and where you're from and how you got interested in cryptozoology and ultimately starting this podcast called Dark Florida.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a dedicated Bigfoot field researcher, and I created the podcast to give a space to talk about anything unexplained, cryptid, or legends from Florida and beyond, because Florida is vast with legends and lore, it seems like, around every corner. And I like to approach Bigfoot in the sense of like investigative journalism. And that's kind of how I see myself in the field, as someone who just isn't speculating, but who's out there actively gathering information and analyzing evidence and getting out there and hiking through the thick brush and being where witnesses have had their sightings take place. And it's one thing to hear a story and a completely another thing to walk that same trail and see if there's any truth to the claims.
Have you found any truth? Did you have any experiences like when you were growing up? Because normally people that, I personally think that people that are really into this had some kind of strange experience when they were growing up. Like a lot of paranormal researchers, like that's the reason why they do it, right? They had a really strange experience whenever they were younger that got them interested in the whole thing. That's what happened to me. But that seems to be like a common thread. So did you have any strange or weird experiences when you were growing up?
I think I was just always curious. I didn't have any strange experiences, but aside from Bigfoot, I was just fascinated by like mysteries. I had to do a history report and I could pick any subject I wanted. And I remember watching a DB Cooper special on the History Channel, and I was instantly hooked. I'm like, from the lists of suspects it could be, with each one more compelling than the last one, I was like, I'm going to write about this. And so I did. And I actually won the social studies fair with it. So that really kicked it off. And then years later, being in high school and looking into 9/11 and Building 7, and just beginning to put together pieces of the puzzle that a lot of people didn't realize were there. So I've kind of been blessed with the curse of wanting to know more. And once you see its symbolism, it's like you can't turn it off. It's everywhere. And so just kind of decoding that. And then I think what pulled me into the world of cryptids was my nanny actually had a sighting, and she was my grandmother. And she had her own sighting here in Florida back in the 70s when it was mostly just citrus groves. And it was not nearly as developed as it is today. So where she was living, they had just started building, and so they had the logs all stacked up from the construction that backhoes had placed there. And they would come out in the morning and they would be just thrown around like matchsticks. So everybody in the community was really on edge about the whole thing. And she would wake up at 3, 4 in the morning to go deliver papers. And she told me that she began parking her truck really close to the house so she could just bolt out, get in the truck, and leave. And one morning in particular, when she went to go make some deliveries, this thing actually chased her and it ran next to her car. And she said it got up to about 40, 50 miles per hour. And she notes the odor that it had, that it was overwhelming. And she later in life, she developed dementia. And even in dementia, she would still retell that story with the same accuracy as she did all those years ago. And like her expression would change. And you could tell it really hit a nerve with her. I actually have a recording of her. She just passed away a few weeks ago, but I was really lucky to record her story. So I do have that like preserved, and it scared her. And so I think you either get scared out of the woods by hearing a story like that, or you become a Bigfoot field researcher. And obviously I went with option B.
Yeah, the woods are really interesting. I mean, if people have ever been out in the woods or in the forest alone at nighttime, like it's a pretty creepy thing. Even if there isn't anything strange going on, it's still kind of scary because I think we have this like innate type of fear of the dark and like being alone, like regardless. It's a pretty creepy thing. I've been out hiking before and it's gotten dark and I'm on like a trail and I'm kind of like, oh, this is kind of creepy.
It is. And especially when you hear something. And that's why we carry around thermals, because that really helps when you hear those noises in the dark. If you can kind of pan and you're like, oh, okay, it's just a raccoon or it's just a deer. Because when you hear things scuffling at night, you're like, oh, what is that?
Yeah, and then like the forest makes noises. Like it makes some really strange and weird noises. And another thing is like big predators too, like panthers. I don't know if you guys have any panthers in
Oh,
Florida,
yeah.
but like wild mountain lions, like really big deal. And those things will screw you up. Like if they get a hold of you, mm-mm.
Oh, yeah. They perch up in the trees. We do have the Florida panthers. We have bears, wild boars, coyotes, just name a few.
So what's your? Pulled up a list of some of the cryptids in Florida, and a lot of these I never even heard of. But what's interesting is that you said that your grandma had a sighting back in the day, and I had a family relative that also had a sighting of Bigfoot that she would tell me about when I was growing up, and she had also seen the Mothman as well. So that kind of like instilled this strange thing with me for the the paranormal and the weird and creepy stuff. But there's like this whole list of you think Florida has the most like cryptids or like what?
You know what's funny? I actually have a picture up in my living room. I got it at we have an annual Christmas Bigfoot dinner party here, and it is as amazing as it sounds. Free invitation for you to come next year. And so we do a gift exchange and we try to make the gift Bigfoot related. And I actually have a picture. Someone got this beautiful art piece of all the Florida cryptids.
Yeah, there's the skunk ape. You got I think wampus cat,
Hmm.
sea devils, uh, even like reports of like mega alligators, which alligators do get really big in Florida, right?
They do. They like
There's
dinosaurs.
another one that's called the muck monster. What is the muck monster? It sounds like a Pokemon. But I think the East Coast is like really heavy and like a lot of cryptids. Like West Virginia has a lot of them.
Yep.
They also have Bigfoot. They have the Flatwoods Monster, which I think the Flatwoods Monster is one of the more interesting ones as well. Like a mechanical type of machine. They also have like I think Ohio has like the Grass Monster or something along those lines.
A lot of paranormal too, even like Skinwalker. I've started calling them crawlers because I actually met and talked with, he's the head medicine man of the Seminole Indian tribe here in Florida. And I asked him, I said, so what is it about skinwalkers? You know, because I'm curious about that. And he said to me, well, that's more of like a Navajo based term for that area. And so out of respect for their culture, I started calling them crawlers because I feel like that's a pretty good, you know, description for what people are seeing as well. And there's a lot of those sightings here in Florida as well.
What about the El Chupacabra? No one talks about the El Chupacabra anymore. That one's kind of just disappeared.
Yeah, it has. Haven't heard anything of that lately.
Or even the Bermuda Triangle. No one really talks about the Bermuda Triangle either.
That is true. The Bennington Triangle seems to be the new one.
What's that one? Where's that at?
Oh, that's up in Connecticut. And people have reported everything from, oh my gosh, Bigfoot to apparitions to even like little elves, like mischievous elves up there. So yeah, Bennington Triangle. It's an area in, I want to say it spans Connecticut, Vermont. Yeah, in that area. And there's a lot of missing persons, disappearances, weird things. So people are starting to look at that one.
Yeah, there's several triangles. You got the Great Lakes Triangle. You have to have the Alaskan Triangle as well. And like Alaska has the most missing people per capita than anywhere else in the United States. Like people are just going missing there all the time. It's so strange.
That is strange.
It is weird. And like, have you ever heard of? I bring this one up because it's one of my favorite ones. It doesn't have anything to do with Florida, but it's called the Alabama Metal Man. Have you ever heard of the Alabama Metal Man?
Ooh, no.
Well, I feel like more attention needs to be brought to the Alabama Metal Man. Okay, it's important because it has evidence to it. So, and that's another thing about a lot of cryptid sightings is there seems to be like a lack of evidence. I know that some people have had like their like supposed Bigfoot hairs like tested, and then it comes back as like inconclusive, or that it's just like a regular hair from a thing. But I get it kind of suspicious of that too, because if it's a physical being and it's a physical creature and it has hairs, would the hairs not come back as like animal hairs? I mean, it would technically be an animal, right? Like, I think people are expecting to find something that nobody knows exactly what it is, when that might not be the case. It might just the DNA structure might come out to just being an animal hair.
Right. You know who writes extensively about that, who I really like? Everybody knows him, Dave Paulides. He actually was at the first Bigfoot conference I went to in Florida, and I saw him again at the Smoky Mountain one. And he's a fantastic one to watch if you ever get the opportunity to hear him speak. He really puts on a good presentation. And he claims to have gathered Bigfoot hair through a series of experiments where he had wrapped the sticky side of the tape around like a tree, and I think about like 9-10 feet up, and he placed, I want to say peanut butter, and he said McDonald's pancakes. That's kind of like his like thing that he's like, they love them. And so he got some hair samples, sent them off to be tested. And what he claims that he received back from GenBank, which is supposed to be one of the largest DNA collection agencies in the world, is that GenBank came back and said that the hair dates back to about 9,000 years ago on the mother's side from the Middle East. And that the male profile, there is no known anything in the GenBank that came back. So it came back with a Middle Eastern woman and then an unknown specimen. So he gives an interesting talk on it. So if you ever get the chance to listen to it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, he's going to be a contact in the desert this year that I'm going to be going to. He's a keynote speaker, so I'm going to get to hear him talk. I'm going to be there. So, yeah, I like a lot of his work. His documentaries are really good. He's probably the only person that has brought any kind of substantial evidence of any kind of alien abduction thing with his new documentary. You watched it, right? I forget what the name of it. The UFO Connection, Missing
Yes.
411, the UFO Connection, and with the guy that shot at the alien and like hit it like a freaking force field that crushed the bullet.
Hmm.
He still has the bullet. It's a really wild. That's a wild one. I really like that one.
Yeah,
He
he's
seems like a
pretty
good
good.
dude.
Yeah, he's an excellent researcher too. I have a couple of his books, and he has an interesting theory. But some people, and that's the thing though, he's one of those figures that are a little bit controversial in the Bigfoot world, because that's one thing that people don't tell you when you get into it, is that you think, oh my gosh, great, I'm here, I found Bigfoot, I found my people, this is going to be great for eternity, until you realize that it's still just like any other group of people, and people have their own opinions and beliefs and things. And with Bigfoot, you could ask 10 people what they think about it, and you're going to get 10 very different answers. And you have a flesh and blood camp, you have a Gigantopithecus camp, human hybrid camp, you have the ape camp. And so depending on where they fall, they have strong opinions about some of the like talking points. So like Meldrum would really represent the science camp, Dr. Meldrum, and then Dave Paulides is kind of like more the woo guy. So it just depends on where people's beliefs fall on that, was, you know, who they probably like.
Then you also have the government experiment camp.
Oh yeah.
I think that they're like created by the government, like that they're hybrid, like chimera, like hybrids that they just let loose in the forest.
Right.
Which is kind of
like Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's more along the lines of like Dogman. Like I think more people think that about Dogman than Bigfoot, but it's kind of put into that camp as well.
That is true. It's interesting you say that, because I've heard more Dogman. I think that's where people get it, I don't want to say wrong, because I'm open to everyone's opinions, but I think that there is a level of government involvement with Bigfoot, but just not in the way of it, you know, being something that was released out into the woods. I think that they know what's going on with Bigfoot, and I think that they are well aware of whatever the phenomena is. I don't think that it's lost on them. There's plenty of legislation that actually like says you cannot kill a Bigfoot. Why would we write a law for something that doesn't exist? And I want to say, even here in Florida, SwiftMud, which is the South Florida, it's a long acronym, but it basically stands for the Fish and Wildlife. Even in their rules for their property, it says that you can't kill the skunk ape. You know, and they publish their hunting rules every year, and that is still in there to this day.
So skunk ape would be the equivalent of Bigfoot for Florida, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is going to be a little bit different than like what you might see in the Pacific Northwest.
So you got Yeti, skunk ape, and Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different names for different ones depending on the region that you're in. But I do think that there's something to the government side of it. I don't know if you know the guy's name. I'm sure you remember his name, because I hear a lot of these stories a lot and I listen to them because I think it's interesting, right? But it's hard for me to retain people's names because there's so many stories and so many things going on out there. But the one guy that was a truck driver, are you familiar with this guy? He was a truck driver and he got supposedly attacked by a dog man or like some kind of creature, and he shot at it and thought that he killed it, and then he turned his truck around and then went back and it was missing, and then there was this Jeep that was pulled up there that had like supposedly like a government license plate on it or whatever. And then a few years later he went to, well, I don't even know how long it was, I'm probably misquoting it because I'm just remembering it off the top of my head, but then he went to a truck like weigh station, and they had him get out of his truck and like go inside of this into the weigh station, and it was like, you know, the people there was like, we got some people that want to talk to you or whatever. And this is all according to him, right? Mm-hmm. It's all his story. Right. And the people, and then these two people in like suits show up and was like, you basically told him that you killed one of our like projects or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they took his gun and took his passport and took his license and all that, and like never returned any of it. Wow. I would have to look it up to remember his name, but I thought that was kind of, it's at least interesting, right? You don't know how much truth there is to a lot of that stuff because it's all like eyewitness people like telling a story, but it's
Yeah.
at least interesting.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Have you heard that story before?
It sounds familiar. I don't think I thought I was with you to a point, but I've heard similar things with Dogman. More government involvement with that one for sure.
So I don't want to skip over the Alabama Metal Man because Alabama Metal Man is important.
Oh
Okay, so
yeah.
in 1973, this guy called Jeff Greenshaw, he was a police chief. He received a call in the middle of the night about some strange activity. It's kind of up in the air what was said on the phone to him. Some say that it was that a woman had called him, said that she had seen a UFO out in this field. So he ended up grabbing his keys, drove out to where the lady said that she had seen this anomalous activity. He didn't see a spaceship, but standing in the middle of the road was a 6 foot tall figure. And according to Greenshaw, it looked like it was like wrapped in like very thick aluminum foil. Okay, and he yelled out to it. It didn't respond. So he goes back to his vehicle, grabs a camera, a Polaroid camera that he had in his glove box, and got closer to the being. And he snapped 3 photos of it. And here's the photos. 3 photos of this metal man. And then the entity turns around and runs off. He gets back in his vehicle and tries to chase after it, and it like outruns him. So he says that he was traveling around 35 miles per hour. So this thing was running even faster than he could keep up with it, faster than his vehicle even goes. And what's interesting about it is like the aftermath of it. So after he had like said what happened to like the police department and the other people, they basically like ridiculed him and said that that he set all this up. Well, there's a bunch of theories. Some people said that he set it all up and that he was trying to play a prank, or that they were kids like playing a prank. But I don't know what kid is over 6 feet tall. I don't know what, because it was around October, so I mean it kind of makes sense that it would be like a Halloween prank. But his house was later broken into. The photos were stolen.
Wow.
He got fired from the police department, and his house burnt down, and his marriage got completely destroyed. His wife basically divorced him over this.
Wow. You know what? This is a really like out in left field theory, but what if that was like some early prototype of like an AI robot that the government was like, yeah, let's test this thing. And he just went and ran into like an early prototype that was like way ahead of its time.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of looks like a spacesuit too, a little bit. Could be like an early
Yeah.
testing
Yeah.
of a spacesuit. I mean, it's kind of hard to zoom in because the quality is not the best, but it kind of looks like a because the underwater suits that divers use look very similar, but you can kind of see a face in here.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of hard to see, but there's like and it looks like it has a really long
breathing
neck.
apparatus too.
Yeah, it definitely could be, and that would make sense because it looks like there's this tube that's going down right here.
Yeah.
But it would make sense if it was, and I'm not saying that I know exactly what it is. I just think it's a really interesting story. But it would make sense that if this was some sort of extraterrestrial being, which I'm on the fence if they even exist, but if it was, then it would make sense that he would need to be in this type of suit, because if you're from like another planet with another atmosphere and a different gravity and different sun and everything, you would need some kind of protective
Totally.
shielding.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that that's one of the most interesting ones that I've ever ran across, stuff, because there's actual photos of it.
No, thank you for sharing that story. That's really cool.
That's a good one. What do you think of the do you remember back around, I think it was like a year ago, I did a show on it. It was the couple in Colorado that was on a train, and they filmed what looked like a creature outside of the train that was walking. Did you see that video?
I did. I thought that was really interesting because I felt like what perfect timing, because I mean the Colorado wilderness has got to be rocky. That probably is not an easy place to get to. So I thought that lent to the credibility of it.
And it kind of looked like the being. I thought it was interesting because the being like looked like it was like sitting down. Like it looked like it was trying to blend in with the shrubbery and the brush.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's what you would do if you realize that you had kind of been spotted. But that would be also what a hunter would do as well. A hunter would want to blend in with the. I mean, that's why they wear camo, right? Is try and blend in with the shrubbery and the greenery.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know what to think of it.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know. I've seen some good footage though, but I don't know what to make of that one.
What's the best footage that you think that you've seen? Because that's another thing with like these cryptids and stuff. Like even with UFO footage, it seems to be like it's all shot on a freaking early 2000s Motorola flip phone.
No, that is true. That is true. Well, I mean, I've actually had my own sort of encounter. I'll get back to the footage because I can tell you footage is one thing, but actually kind of seeing something and experiencing it is a completely different thing entirely, you know? And it's not until you kind of experience something that shouldn't be happening that it really clicks and it's real. Because the whole time I'm out there, I'm like, you know, we have this faith that these things exist, but until you really come face to face with one, there's always that little piece in your mind that's kind of just like, is it though? So last June, let me back it up a little bit. The BFRO, which is the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, breaks sightings up into two groups. You have a class A sighting, which is like you saw something big, hairy, obviously not human, and you saw this thing. There's no way that you could be misidentifying it. You laid eyes on it. Class B is like you heard it, a vocalization, you saw tracks, you maybe found hair, a sign of its existence, but without actually putting your eyes on the creature that made it. So that's kind of how they break the two sightings up. So what I experienced in the Green Swamp last June was more on the Class B side because we actually found what I believe are prints. And we were primitive camping out there for a few days and we hadn't seen anybody the entire time we were out there. We were deep in the woods and we use e-bikes to get around because you can get 10, 15, 20 miles deep and then hike around from there because in Florida, let's be honest, the heat and the humidity zaps you quick. So if we can get further into a remote area and location to really immerse ourselves in the environment, it's a huge help. So we were riding back from one of the locations that we had been at, and we're always surveying the ground, or at least I know that I am. I'm always looking to see if we spot any kinds of tracks or signs, because you'll see bear, coyote, turkey in the limestone kind of sand or mud, which is primarily what these trails consist of. So we're riding along and I look down and I'm like, holy crap, I see a track. So I like slam on the brakes. I'm like, everybody stop. And so we get off and we start surveying the area because this is clearly a footprint. And we found this trackway, and the trackway veers off the trail into the woods on no obvious trail. Like it goes completely off the main trail into nothing. And so I get out my phone and I start measuring these tracks because some of them were in the mud and you could really see the details. You could see the toes that had dug into the mud. And I'm like, oh, this is so crazy. So I get it out and I start measuring it. And it was, I want to say 12.5 inches long by 5 inches wide by 2 inches deep. And then the stride length between this first track and the next track was around 5 feet, 6 inches. And I'm 5'9". So for me to do that, I would have to pretty much do the splits and I still wouldn't be able to achieve that ratio. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm taking pictures of everything, measuring everything. And I kept it to myself for a little while because I really wanted to be sure, because I had a few people tell me that somebody runs barefoot out in the green swamp, which very well might be true. In my heart, I really genuinely believe that these are Bigfoot tracks, and I kept it to myself because I was like, I want to be sure before I put anything out. And I actually went to the Great Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference in July. So about a month later, I'd had these. And we stayed with some BFRO investigators up there who have been leading expeditions and have been in this field for a really long time. So they've been around, they've taken reports, they've seen it all. And so I showed them the tracks, and she was blown away when I showed her. And she was like, you are onto something. And then she was like, did they just veer off trail into nothing? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, okay. And so it was almost like she knew. And it was just, that was like the validation I needed. And so I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, she thinks these are legit. Like, this is really cool. I showed them to a few more people, and they were like, those are really good. And then a photo came out of the green swamp of some trail cam footage where it looks like there's this tall, what you would describe as like a skunk ape figure. And it, to me, looks like a little one is in tow, like possibly a juvenile. And so I know I had these footprints, and I was like, I felt like I needed to post it because I felt inauthentic holding on to this evidence. Because when we go out there, it's not that we just go looking for Bigfoot. I look at it like we're going to find the truth. And I just felt like it was inauthentic to hold on to it. And I wanted to live my truth and publish it. And I know some people will say that it's a barefoot runner, and it could be. But what's really interesting about that is that was like my Class B sighting. And I know that was really weird. And we were out there just in the middle of nowhere. And then I actually were going on an official BFRO expedition this week up in North Florida. And I can't say exactly where, other than to say it's in the Panhandle, because they do make you sign an NDA so that way people don't come and you know, skew anything. And they really try to give people a good experience in an active area. So we don't want it like getting out to everybody. Well, we went up, myself and my research partner, Morin, we went up to help Jeff, the organizer, scout some locations back in Thanksgiving. And so we're up there, and this is in the middle of nowhere. There's barely any cell service, like horrible. We're in the middle of this national forest, and we're a few days into the trip. And we had already been warned about this area because this area has skinwalker legends, black-eyed kids legends, along with Bigfoot. So really a whole ton of really crazy stuff happening up in this area. Multiple reports, from one of them being from someone I know personally. So I already kind of had that in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, great. So we get there, and it's on like the last day. We're settling in around the fire. There was an extreme freeze warning out. So we're kind of winding down for the evening. And my friend Marion goes, I lost my phone. And we're like, oh no, because it's not like we can call it. And so we just got up and we're like, okay, we'll help you look for it, because she thinks she lost it when she went on this solo hike on this trail around the campground earlier. So we're like, okay, let's go find it. Because right now it's like 9 o'clock at night. So we get up, and the trail literally goes up behind someone's campsite. So we try to be really respectful when we're at the trailhead. And we're walking, and I see these lights up ahead, and I'm like, are we already back at the campsite? And Jeff's in front of me, Marion's behind me. And then these two lights, they just disappear. And I'm like, what the heck? And so now at this point, I'm thinking, is that someone's headlamp? Is there someone else out here? Because like I said, we were in the middle of the forest. Unfortunately, people do poach. They do illegal hunting. And I think what scares me more is running into somebody like that out there at night who does not want to be bothered. So I'm like, Jeff, like, you know, get back here. So he comes back. I'm like, I just saw these two lights up there. And he's like, huh. So brings up the flashlight, and we're scanning the woods. And so where I saw the lights was about 12 o'clock on the trail. And then the light hits, and I see these two eyes around the 9 o'clock position, and I see them, and they just move like up, down, really quick. And it just sent a chill down my spine. I got really scared. I just didn't know what to do. I started kind of internally shaking because I was like, it moved in such an unnatural way and we couldn't see it anymore. And he goes, well, it now knows that you saw it and it is hunkered down like right there. Like it's hunkered down back there and we're looking in the brush. And I mean, it's pitch black, it's freezing. You can only see so far into the shrubs and you just kind of I know what I saw. And so I just have this awful feeling of kind of like dread that just kind of comes over you. And I got myself together. We talked amongst ourselves and like, do we turn around? Do we go back? And we're like, we need to try this, find this phone. So we keep pressing on and we get a little further up in the trail and Jeff goes, oh my gosh, I feel like I just saw this black shadow figure next to me. And we're like, what? And he was like, it took my mind a minute to process what I just saw. And we went back to where he said he had just seen this thing. And you know, the brush is so thick, but you could definitely see where there were some game trails where something could be moving around there. So those were some of the weird sightings I've had.
How big did you say that the print was? How did you measure it? Did you measure it with a measuring tape or a ruler, or did you took pictures of it, right?
Yep, we have pictures of it. We used a measuring tape and I used the measure app on my phone. So I have both. And that was 12.5 by 5 by 2 depth.
So 12.5 inches long?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is a little small.
That's what I was thinking, because if the stride was 5 feet for a 12.5 foot, I mean, I'm 6'5" and I wear a size 14 shoe. I don't know if I could probably stride, if I was really stretching, I could probably stride that long, but it doesn't really make sense, because normally the taller that you are, that means the bigger that your foot is. So if it was, you get what I'm saying?
I do.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense of how it could be that short of a print and have that long of a stride. I mean, but we don't really know what these creatures are like.
Yeah.
They might have smaller feet to make them more agile, but they're actually taller, so it makes them be able to run around. I don't know.
Well, we sort of have, we were thinking about that too, and we're floating around different theories and ideas. And my friend Marion, she went to an expedition in Missouri, and she was chatting with Shane Carpenter. And I believe that's his name, Shane Carpenter. And he has this property. It's 400 acres and it's private property, which for Bigfoot is like a gold mine because it's untouched. You don't have people coming in and trampling evidence, and you can really just, hone in on an area. And he began to notice a pattern with the prints that they were finding on that property, that every 2 years they would start finding these smaller prints. And his theory is that over time, as they mature and reach adulthood, that their feet actually flatten out. The Bigfoot's feet will flatten. But when they're younger, you're going to have more of the arch. They're going to be a little smaller. And then as they get older, that's where they begin to flatten. And then for Florida specifically, the skunk ape is usually a good foot or two shorter than what's reported out in the Pacific Northwest. You'll hear a lot of 9-10 feet reports out there, but here you kind of get that 6 foot, maybe 7 foot tall. So they are a little smaller down here in Florida. So I don't know if that plays into it at all, but definitely things to consider.
Did you end up finding your friend's phone?
Yes, we did. Thankfully.
Where did you find it?
It was a little further up on the trail because she realized she didn't have on her orange. And when you're out there in the woods like that during hunting season, we try to all wear orange. And so she realized she didn't have it. So she had taken her pack off and went to go put the orange vest on, and she thinks it fell out then.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because lights and things are also kind of associated with cryptid sightings as well, like the strange anomalous lights and like orbs. My friend Trey Hudson, he has footage of what he believes is do you guys use thermal imaging cameras at all?
We do.
So he has this thermal imaging footage of this place that he calls the Meadow, which is he's never disclosed exactly where. It's kind of like what you were talking about with this other gentleman. They don't want to disclose where the exact location is, because then a lot of people will be showing up and probably disrupt a lot of things. So he has this place called the Meadow, and has a whole team. They're like all military. They're all military team, and they go out there and investigate. And he has footage of this entity that's like standing in the brush, and then it's like a shadow, and it seems like it's really tall, and then it like splits into two different beings, and then it goes back into one. It's some of the most compelling footage that I've ever seen. I saw it at a conference like 4 years ago, and doesn't really share it because he's making like documentaries and using the footage, and he doesn't want the footage out there. But he also has footage of like a portal that opened, like a legit real portal, where his team walked through, and they completely 100% disappear off of the FLIR. Like they're just walking alongside this lake, and they just walking, and then they're gone. Like that's not how FLIR footage works. Like it doesn't matter what you're really behind. I guess if you're walked in behind a really big tree, it might be able to block the thermal imaging camera. But there's 3 of them that walk, and then they just disappear. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the project you're talking about. I've always wanted to see that footage.
Yeah, he's got some UFO stuff as well, some strange lights in the sky and stuff. But it's some of the most interesting and footage that I've ever really seen. I wish he would let me do a show on it and present the footage on here, but he's trying to do a bunch of other stuff with it. So, but I've seen it. I got to see it at the conference, and it was very compelling.
I know you asked me about footage, and to get back to that, there is a set of researchers based out of Ocala. They're Bigfoot World Cryptids, the paranormal researchers of Central Florida. And we've become really close friends. Shout out to them. They're awesome.
I think they were here in the chat somewhere.
Oh, really? Oh, I love it. So
way back up here.
They are the best, and they've got so much footage. And that was one of the things is she actually showed me the raw footage on her. Oh, there she is. They showed me the raw footage on the computer of the actual thing. So it's not edited in any type of way. And they were filming backwards, actually using a thermal in one of their locations. And she's just going through the footage, reviewing everything when she came across this particular section. And clear as day, you can see this being just move up the tree just effortlessly. And it is the craziest thing to me. It looks almost like that scene where Edward and Bella are going through the trees and Bella's on his back. It almost looks like either someone's on the back of someone or maybe wings. And they thought maybe even like some kind of a Martian or something like that. But it's definitely one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that I've seen. I know that they have that posted, so I'll have to send that to you. It's pretty crazy. And they've taken us out to some of their research locations, which are very active.
Yeah, I always really find it interesting, like with anything, people always try and come out and claim that they faked it. Like it's been with like crop circles. That's another one that's really interesting. Like to completely discredit the entire thing, they essentially have like these farmers come out with these things and say that they made all the crop circles. Like there's no way that you can make this. Like some of them, obviously, others are fabricated. They're not real. But some of the more intricate ones, like I don't see how somebody can do that with a freaking wood plank. It doesn't really make any sense. But there's always those types of people that come out, like the one gentleman and his son that said that they would make the Bigfoot cast like prints, and then they would go out and like put them in the forest or whatever, that they're like fake. And people have claimed that the Patterson and Gimlin footage is, 100% someone in a bear costume. Some people said that they fake the Mothman sightings. So there's always those people that like come out and is like, oh well, this isn't real. I was the one that faked all this stuff,
Yeah.
which they could have. That could have been the case, but and they could have done it at the same time. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't something like also real going on. Like that one UFO case that Netflix did a documentary on that was at the school. Are you familiar with this? It's like in Zimbabwe or some other country where a bunch of these school kids seen a UFO in the back of the school in like a field or whatever,
Oh, that
and
does sound familiar.
and the being came out of the UFO and like approached like some of the kids or whatever, and then there was one guy that said that he's the one that convinced all the kids to have the same story. Like one kid said that he's the one that made it all up. So there's like always those people that come out and try and like discredit, um, which you don't really know. You don't really know, and I think that just adds to the mystery of this whole thing.
It does. And I think that there could be an intentional, and I've discussed this with some people close to me. I think that there's an intentional side of it too, because just like with misinformation as far as like the alien stuff, so that, you know, they do the disclosure, and you have people who come out and they say these things that are really baseless, but people will cling on to that. And I think it's almost done to almost discredit and say, oh, like you said, oh, someone's going out and making those prints in the wood. I wonder how much of it is intentional just to add a little chaos to something, because even Dave Paulides talks about it, because apparently some federal agents have popped up at conferences he's been at, and he at the Florida one said that they came by his booth and, you know, they're like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, oh, great. Like, what are you guys like doing here? So I'm looking around like, who's the Fed? So I'm trying to like figure it out. But I feel at some level, even, you know, with this field and with the alien disclosure stuff, I wonder how much is intentional, just not true, just to muddy the waters, to keep us further from really getting to the truth of it.
Yeah, that's been a big contention with me when it comes to anything UFO related or alien related, because when you look back at the history of a lot of the UFO mythology, it all comes directly from the government. It all comes from OSI and the NSA. Like pretty much everything that people report that repeat things about ufology and like aliens and extraterrestrial involvement all come directly from the government.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so crazy, and that's why I've kind of taken a step back from the UFO topic, and it's gotten so political as well. You know, it's all about, you know, we need more government transparency. I'm like, well, the government is the one that created all this. Like, and you want the government to tell you that you want the government to accept it now when they've been the ones that has essentially created the entire phenomenon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's super wild. So the sightings that you've had in Florida, have you ran into people that have had similar experiences? Like, what is the most common cryptid that people see in Florida? Is it the skunk ape?
I would say so. Yeah, we're the third most popular state for Bigfoot sightings. I believe we lead behind California and Washington. So Florida's the third. So I think that would be probably the most. Obviously, there's a lot of haunted things here in Florida. There is a little bit of a dark history. I mean, you go to St. Augustine, and pretty much anywhere you go in that city is haunted, just due to its really gory kind of a past. It's America's oldest city, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. It dates back to the 1500s. So definitely Bigfoot, but there's also a lot of ghost sightings and things like that here too.
I think there's star forts in Florida. Have you ever been to one of those star forts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe there's
What did you
two.
think about that?
I love that whole rabbit hole. I could go down that one for a while. I love that. The old world, Florida and the Tartaria stuff. I can get lost in that.
What do you think that they were? Do they have like guided tours of those areas, or can you just go and like look? Or are they still really big structures, or are they like smaller structures?
Well, it's so funny. The one in St. Augustine, you can go right up to it. You can walk around it. Sometimes I've noticed like they do close it down a lot to the public for repairs or whatever it may be, but it's definitely still standing. You can walk right up to the outside of it. And what makes that one kind of unique is it was made with the shell, I think called coquina, and it absorbs gun gunshots or cannonballs, and it's actually almost like a sponge. So that's one of the cool things about it, that it's still standing, is because it's kind of flexes. It's not like just solid cement or something that has no give to it. It's got a little bit of give to it, and you can walk right up to it. You can even see, unfortunately, like one side of the walls where they would shoot prisoners and things like that. You can still see all of their execution areas on with all the bullet holes and stuff in it. So yeah, you can walk up to it.
That's wild. And what do historians in Florida say that they were used for? Because I think that that's always really important, and people try and like discount all of those things. But I'd like to know what the official story is, and like what they say that it was, and like how they believe that it was built. Because then you can inform your own opinion based off of what they say that
Yeah.
it is.
I believe they said that the Spaniards built it because the
Mm.
Spanish landed in that St. Augustine area. But they
So
also have the Fountain of Youth there, which is really interesting. They have this area that they claim is the Fountain of Youth, and you can go and actually drink the water, because they said that when they landed, that all the Indians, they were or Native Americans, indigenous, were so tall and just beautiful that they thought that they had found the Fountain of Youth. And there are a lot of minerals, really rich deposits in the water. So not sure if that played a part to it, but that's another interesting piece of St. Augustine history.
I've heard that as well. I've heard that that's where they believe that the Fountain of Youth. Have you been there? Have you drank the water?
I have. Can't you tell?
Mm.
I'm just kidding.
Beautiful. What what uh what did it taste like? Did it taste different?
No, it just kind of tastes it. You can, I feel like you can tell that it's a little bit more on the earthier side. It's got the minerals and stuff in it because you can tell when you've got really good water with all the nice nutrients in it. So I would say a little earthier, but maybe it's psychosomatic. I don't know. They have a whole thing on the inside. You can go and pour it yourself. You can
I
even take
got
some home.
I got a conspiracy. What if they make you believe that that's the Fountain of Youth and everyone can come and drink the water, but the real Fountain of Youth is underneath the perceived Fountain of Youth?
That is a good point. I thought you were going to
Mm.
go a different direction with that. I thought you were going to say it's like actually stealing your youth. I was about to be like, oh no.
That reminds me of the movie As Above, So Below. Have you seen that one about the Paris catacombs where they're trying to go and find the jewel, what's the Philosopher's Stone?
Oh, okay. No, I know what you're talking about, but I've never seen it.
And they go into the catacombs, and then at the end of it, they have to go so deep through the catacombs that they essentially like pop out on the other side.
Interesting. Like an upside down world.
Yeah, sort of like an upside down world.
Okay.
Which makes sense because that's what I believe that occultists and the like dark magic. That's what they practice, is that they want to go so deep into the darkness that they pop out on the other side into the light. I don't know
The
if that makes sense or
duality.
not.
hmm No,
Got to go
absolutely.
super dark to get super light, I guess. It's a screwed up way to do it, but that's what they believe, I think.
It is that dark to light. And I know the Masons are really into that.
Is there a lot of? I've never been to Florida. Well, I have been to Florida. I went to Jacksonville,
Okay,
Florida
so you
once.
haven't been to Florida. Hmm.
I did not like Jacksonville, but I've always wanted to actually go to Florida, like Florida. Is there a lot of Freemason? I mean, every town kind of has a Freemason building, right?
Yeah, unfortunately it does. But there's actually one place I really want to go. It's in Mount Dora. And so Mount Dora is kind of this just like little town right outside of Orlando, essentially, with a lot of little lakes and things around it. And in the town, there's actually a Masonic temple there that it's like this old Victorian style home, probably 1800s or early 1900s. And you go and you can actually do a ghost tour there. And it is definitely a Masonic temple. It has all the imagery on the stained glass. And I'm like, that is a place that I want to check out.
Isn't the St. Augustine lighthouse like supposedly super haunted?
Mm-hmm. And if you ask some people's opinions, they will tell you that every lighthouse in Florida is haunted, has its own tale.
That's interesting. I remember seeing I think it was a picture that someone took at the St. Augustine. It's like the most famous picture that was taken there that had the lady in white at the bottom of the step or the top of the step or something like that. Are you familiar with that one?
You know what's funny is I believe I know the woman who took the photo.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm pretty sure. So with Bigfoot World, one of the researchers in that group, her name is Pam, and she said that she had walked up the stairs, and it kind of comes out and you can look around like a 360 view. Well, the rest of the group went left and she went right. And it was almost as if, I believe she said, like the creature or the woman in white, like was trying to avoid this group over here and didn't consider her coming around from over there. So she was able to kind of sneak up and capture it. And she donated the photo to the lighthouse and it's still there. So I'm wondering if that's the same one.
I'm trying to find it right now, but I can't seem to. They probably just want it for their museum, so they don't put it out online a lot.
Yeah. There is a really cool museum there and a house that you can go and tour. And it has a lot of information about the home and the area. That's a really cool place.
Put in St. Augustine, Florida, lady in white photo. Come on, Google, come through for me. Nope, I'm not finding it, but I distinctly remember seeing it before.
Yeah.
But I don't remember if it was at the top of the step or if it was like I think it was at the bottom of the staircase, wasn't
it? It could be. I know people have reported some weird stuff there. I haven't seen anything weird, but that I'm also afraid of heights. So I was like, okay, I'll peek inside. I don't need to climb the staircase.
So back to the footage of this stuff, because we were talking about the footage of like Bigfoot and why it always seems to be super blurry, and not only with that, but with UFO footage as well. It seems like it's always like the worst type of footage. Like it's always the most blurry, the most grainy footage that you've ever seen, which is so strange for the time that we have now. I mean, I have like the latest iPhone, and the quality on the phone, even if you have like an Android or like some of those Google phones, like are incredible with pictures. Like you can literally take the sharpest freaking picture, better than any super highly expensive camera that you could buy. Mm-hmm. And it's just really strange to me why it seems like everything is always so blurry. And as a filmmaker and as someone that works a lot with editing and uses a lot of, software to put things together. The reason that you would want something to be super blurry, especially when it comes to like UFO footage, is because the object is artificially inserted into the photo or artificially inserted into the video. So you would want to blur the whole thing to try and like cover up the fact that the subject of the video or the photo has been artificially put into the video or photo. Mm-hmm. So if you blur it all, it makes it seem like that because if you were to make the background really clear and then the footage of the thing that's in the photo is not as clear as the background, then it's going to make it to where it's very obvious that it's been placed into the video or the photo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder, I feel like so many of the sightings you hear, they're really quick. So to play devil's advocate here a little bit, and just some Bigfoot facts, is that a lot of these sightings are fast. They happen anywhere from 5 to maybe 10 seconds. They're usually not, you usually don't hear, oh, I was hiking along, I walked up on Bigfoot, I got to watch it for a little while, like watch it eat lunch and leave. A lot of these happen really quick. And so even us being out there trying to be prepared, like when we went to go look for her phone, it was not Bigfoot on the mind. It was, okay, we got to find the phone. So we didn't have any of our normal equipment going to try to capture anything, which I know it's like, everyone's always like, oh, did you get it? And we're like, oh, we weren't running it because, so I just wonder that sometimes with these photos, if like, because they happen so quickly, if, you know, maybe the frame rate or something like that affects the clarity of the image. And because these things are happening so fast, I feel like with UFOs, though, you would have a better chance of getting something. I think that those sightings usually last a little bit longer. You'll hear people say, well, the light followed me, or I saw the lights for a few minutes. Whereas Bigfoot happens incredibly fast. So that's why I think I wonder if there's the lack of evidence from that side.
That could be because, I mean, if you see something strange and you're not expecting it and you just whip out your phone or whatever, I would just strap a freaking GoPro to my head. Just strap a GoPro, duct tape a GoPro to my helmet on my head if I was going out Bigfoot investigating, and I would just record the entire time.
Most of
100%.
we look, oh man, I'll have to send you some pictures, but most of us do. We have and I have it too. I know I definitely have try to go for the aesthetic sometime. I'm like, gosh, this like crazy contraption on my head. But you're right. We talk about it. It's the best way to capture footage because your head, wherever your neck goes, your head's going. Whereas your chest, if say we're biking along or even you're walking and you turn your head, your chest isn't moving. Your chest is still putting straight ahead. So if you're seeing something maybe off to the left or the right or behind you, yeah, you're not going to capture that if you have the camera anywhere but on your head.
Yeah, it probably looks super silly, but I would do it. I'd 100% do it. I mean, if I was into it and I was Bigfoot hunting, I'd be out there. Now, when it comes to the noises of Bigfoot and the sounds that it makes, because we talked about David Paulides earlier, and at the end of his second documentary, Missing 411, The Hunted, I think it's called The Hunted or The Hunters. I'm pretty sure it's The Hunted.
Yes.
At the end of that documentary, he has, these noises, these what appears to sound like nothing that a human being can make, by these gentlemen that captured it. I think back in, was it the 80s or the 90s? A long time ago. They captured it. Yeah, in California. Yeah.
Wow, I think that was like the 70s, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And they had this camp there, and they made like this fort or whatever that they could like hide from these things or whatever, if they heard them or whatever. And then the footage was, the audio was then tested, and it was determined that no human, they didn't really say no human could make the sound. They can't figure out exactly what was making the sound. Mm-hmm. So what do you know? What do we know about the noises that any of these cryptids make?
Yeah, so with Bigfoot in particular, I think there's a couple of noises that you can attribute to that. Is you have your vocalization. So you might hear a whoop or even just a really crazy scream or call, but there's also reports of whistling, which is a really big one. And especially in the areas that we go, and some researchers I know have experienced that whistling. And like they will hear it whistling and walking around. So you have your basic calls that we kind of think of, but there's also like wood taps, like the wood knocks. And it's kind of been this point of debate of they possibly are signaling to other Bigfoot, like, okay, they're leaving an area, they're exiting an area. But as far as the vocals go, I've heard some that my friend Marion had recorded from an expedition up in the upper. Actually, no, I'm getting the stories confused. It was here at the same place that we're going in just a few days. And this lady makes a call, and I have it, I can send it to you. She makes a call, and you can see it on the spectrogram where she makes the call and then it's quiet, and then something responds back to her, and it's at a different. So on the spectrogram, it breaks things up by sound. So you can see, okay, that's an owl, that's a coyote, that's us talking. It appears on it differently. And you can hear this thing respond back to her. I haven't heard anything myself, but there's definitely calls that people hear and have been reported in Florida and in the areas that we go to. So you have vocalizations. They call it kind of like monkey chatter, but sometimes people get that confused with owls. And these owls, if you've never heard it, and the first time you hear it, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like this is it. And then my friend Marion's like, no, that's just the owls. And you're like, oh, it's like you want to believe that some of these owls are making these calls, because they do make very similar to what you think a Bigfoot would be, kind of the whooping. It's not always that traditional hoo hoo. It's this really weird noise they make. And so it's always good to have the Morin app to identify different birds and things like that. If you're out in the wild and you're trying to figure out, is that a Bigfoot call or is that just a regular bird? It has a giant archive of different sounds on there, so you can kind of run your audio through that to do process of elimination. But yeah, I've never heard any of the calls myself, but I have heard reports of them.
That's so weird about the owl thing, because that's what they tried to say with the Flatwoods monster, that the whole family saw in the neighbor, that it was just a giant barn owl.
Yeah.
Like, these people live in West Virginia. Like, they know all the animals. Why would they mistake something for a freaking barn owl?
They did the same thing for the Hopkinsville goblins. They did the same thing. They tried to say that they were just barn owls as well.
One of them, well, they said that it was an escaped kangaroo. I'm like, what do you mean an escaped kangaroo? I think I forget where that was, but this guy had it was a really famous case. He'd seen something that looked like a dog man that was outside of his house, and apparently like ripped up the siding of his house, and like these big huge long claw marks, and like ripped the screen door off of his house and all that. And he's like telling all these people, and then they had legit tracks of this thing, and he's seen it several times, and he said it looked like a creature. I would have to look up exactly where this was. I'm thinking like around New Orleans or somewhere in that area, but the official explanation was that it was an escaped kangaroo. Those are some of my favorite ones, where they attribute it like an animal that is not even like from the region, that magically made its way to this guy's house and destroyed his property.
Right. And when you talked about the owls, honestly, I have it on my list of things I really want to do an episode about, because I feel like they're just, I recognize patterns, and I start picking up on things. And I know you're probably well versed in symbolism, and you know that the owl is nothing short of a very symbolic figure, from Bohemian Grove to just what it represented to Native American culture and the omen that it brings. And it's interesting because it seems to have found its way into the Bigfoot world and into the world of aliens. You have people who are saying that there could be some kind of a correlation there between aliens and owls. And then you also hear them saying that owls mimic Bigfoot. So I'm like, okay, owls are popping up a lot. I feel like, like a deeper dive needs to be done into them, because they're interesting. They're in a lot of different places conveniently.
When I was a kid, I thought that animal statues of like owls and like animal statues of like birds and stuff was like always alive. I thought they were like still alive. Like when I would go to McDonald's, they had this bird that was on top of this pole, like the American flag. Every time we would go, I'd be like, why is that bird always there? I thought that like stuffed taxidermy things were like still alive, and I'd always ask, why are they not moving? So I was
Right.
just a kid, but no one ever corrected me. I hold that resentment toward them. But also you have the lizard man as well. I think it happened in South Carolina. I believe the lizard man of Lee County,
Mm-hmm.
where do you know about the story?
No, but it sounds like a few other things that I've heard out of that area, as far as like the reptilians.
Yeah, this guy reported, I think that it was in like the early 80s. There's also an episode of this on Netflix. Well, no, it's on Hulu, I think. It's on Hulu. And it talks about this gentleman that was driving his car late one night and he encountered this creature that he said looked like a lizard, and it jumped on the top of his car and made these giant claw marks down his car. And then he somehow got rid of it. It somehow flipped off of the car or whatever. And then he went home and like told his dad about it. And then they like the evidence was there. There was these giant claw marks in this dude's car.
Don't they have a festival in the town now every year for it?
Yeah, just like they have the Mothman
Mm-hmm.
festival. I think they do a parade or something for the Flatwoods monster too.
Might as well.
Yeah. And then that's what they'll say. This well, it's just like a big like tourist attraction. Well, people did not talk about the Mothman for a really long time. Like nobody in the town would talk about the Mothman. They would not even mention it because they were so freaked out. And the Silver Bridge collapse just spooked people, and also the Men in Black sightings that happened during that time before the bridge collapsed as well. Like you tried to talk to people about it, they were. Mm-mm. It wasn't until the movie with Richard Gere came out called The Mothman Prophecies that the town kind of started leaning heavier into it to promote tourism, but it was never about tourism in the beginning. It wasn't originally called the Mothman either. It was called the Birdman.
Mm, that's interesting. I love the giant bird rabbit hole.
Oh my God! What do you know about those birds? There's this
Like the
thing,
Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds. Yes, the Thunderbirds. Tell me about the Thunderbirds while I look up this case. You might be talking about the exact same one.
Well, I know that in the Native American culture that they talked about the Thunderbirds and how they were really dangerous. And that was another thing that my nanny had talked about was the giant winged creature that flew over the woods. And I think that's interesting because earlier you were kind of talking about like human fears and DNA. And I think like that's why, a plane goes over and we kind of like all look up because of that giant shadow. So it kind of makes you wonder if there's this like instinctual ancestor fear that's just written into our DNA, kind of how we're afraid of spiders naturally or that kind of a thing, that at one point we were terrorized by these giant birds.
Yeah, so this is the case that I'm thinking of. I'm glad you jogged my memory on this. I've talked about it a few times, but sometimes I forget these. But it's the 1977 Lawndale, Illinois Thunderbird attack. Are you familiar with this one? This one's wild. So in 1977, Lawndale, Illinois Thunderbird attack was a reported attack by two unidentified birds on a young boy. The attack occurred on July 25th, 1977. 10-year-old Marlon Lowe was playing outside when he suddenly attacked by two large birds, one which temporarily picked him up and carried him over 30 feet before Marlon's mother, Ruth Lowe, ran out to her son's rescue, chasing the birds away and then recovering her traumatized son. Reportedly, several eyewitnesses had seen the attack take place. The birds were described as having a white ring around their neck and 4.5-foot body, with each wing approximately 4 feet long, a 6-inch hooked bill, 3 front claws, 1 back claw, and a large black body. That's like historical fact.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, the Lawndale, Illinois Thunderbird attack.
Very interesting. Huh.
Yeah, that was investigated and reported, and there was a big, huge news story about it. I think that it's also in a some documentary series as well.
That's interesting about Illinois because like you hear now about the Chicago Mothman. So to your point of, the West Virginia one originally being reported out as like the bird type creature, there have been an uptick of the sightings there in Chicago and the surrounding areas of a winged humanoid creature that has been spotted and that can just shoot straight up vertically into the air with ease. That's really interesting to find a story that dates back that far ago in that area.
Yeah, that the Mothman kind of jumped from West Virginia into Chicago, huh?
Yeah, it just flew over there.
Interdimensional Mothman. But then you also have the Smiling Man as well, which they call Injured Cold. There in West Virginia, that was around the same time as the Mothman sightings.
A little fun fact, I actually lived in West Virginia for a little bit growing up.
Really, where at?
In the Panhandle on the top of Third Mountain, and it's called Hedgesville, but it's near like Back Creek Valley in Martinsburg. And looking back, it's interesting when I think about it, because I remember growing up, we lived on like a 5-acre property, and we were surrounded by other people who had like 10 acres, 12 acres. So it was like your neighbors weren't really your neighbors. They were there, but you didn't see them. And there was thick woods, and we were on top of this third mountain. Like we were literally at the peak. You could see the top of it, and it went down the other side to a wildlife management area, which looking back on, that's really interesting. But I remember being so freaked out there at night. I hated it. And the way that our house was set up, that our basement had these giant windows and these stairs that led upstairs. And I know I had to put my dog away down there. And I remember being so scared, and just this like feeling that something or someone was watching me and looking at me. I was terrified to be near the windows at night. And I know that like that might be like a kid thing, but I remember it really specifically there. And I remember just being so scared and so freaked out. And looking back at it now, I'm like, I wonder if there was more to that it was just my sixth sense was just picking up on.
Yeah, West Virginia has a lot of strange history, and it's looked over a lot because it's kind of just like a flyover state. But it's the first battle of the Revolutionary War happened in West Virginia. There was this underground bunker at the Greenbrier branch, that the Greenbrier Hotel, which is in Greenbrier, West Virginia, that where if something were to happen, a nuclear war during the Cold War or anything like that happened, that's where the president and all the politicians would go down to, is the Greenbrier in West Virginia for safety. There's also the abandoned amusement park in West Virginia that looks like Chernobyl, and then the QR code in that movie, that Obama movie on Netflix. This is how it ends, or I think that's the name of it. The QR code that you can scan in there takes you to that amusement park.
Does it really?
In West Virginia, yeah.
That is so weird. I never watched it. I refuse to be a part of it. Like if something gets like to whatever, I'm like, I won't support it. I just read everybody else's synopsis on the symbolism like online. I'm like, I'm not giving into it.
Yeah, it's just super interesting. And then that abandoned amusement park is only like an hour away from the Greenbrier Hotel, which was this bunker for all of the politicians and the president, that was built into the side of the mountain.
That's really
It's
cool.
wild. So much history there that really gets overlooked. And a lot of cryptids.
Yeah.
Someone just asked, where has the most cryptids? I think you mentioned it earlier. You said Florida and Washington?
Yeah. So for Bigfoot, I think California is number 1, Washington's number 2, and then we're number 3. But as far as the most cryptids, oh gosh, that's tough. I think I would say Appalachia. I think the East Coast. That's my opinion. I think that I really do. I feel like we take the win there, because Appalachia, it's just ancient, and there's so much going on there. It's just, it really is a different energy. You are in some of these places and you can just feel the shift. So I would say East Coast.
East Coast. Someone said, where has the least? I think every state has like at least one or two.
I think that they said Hawaii has, I don't think that they've had a Bigfoot sighting. I don't believe so. So maybe Hawaii.
Hawaii, that would be because it's kind of a small island. They would just be able to capture it and kill it,
Exactly.
probably.
Yeah. I think Hawaii has more of the island legend and lore to it. They've got some of the spirits over there, you know, the island spirits. I think that's where they kind of rise up in that cryptid sense, or at least the paranormal, supernatural side.
Yeah, do you think that the paranormal stuff is connected to Bigfoot and some sort of anomalous lights in the sky? Like, because it's like what you were saying in the very beginning of the show is like if you ask 10 different people what they think Bigfoot is, it's always going to be something different. And I think that if someone gave this example to me, I forget who it was. It might have been Trey Hudson, but they were like, "Oh well, if you take a paranormal investigation team to a site that's supposed to be haunted, they're going to come out and say that it's haunted. If you take a Bigfoot investigation team out to a place where Bigfoot is reported, they're going to come out and say that it's Bigfoot. If you take a UFO hunter team out to a place that says it's reported with UFO activity, they're going to say that it's UFOs."
Sure. That confirmation bias. And I think it's important to note that a lot of what we do, we don't find anything. And so that's why, like, when we do get some stories, we definitely hang on to them. It's always nice to go out and look and scout for areas. So you have to be in it for something more than just Bigfoot. So you have to be in it for getting to see nature, because a lot of times we get to see really cool encounters with animals that we typically won't. Like, we had an incredible otter encounter. So a lot of times it's that, or getting to see, the wild pigs and the wild boars and the deer and just some of the different, natural beauty. Because believe me, I wish we were going out every time and getting a crazy knock or a yell or seeing it, but it's not as common. But yeah, I know what you mean as far as the confirmation bias.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of makes sense, if like that's what you're into, like that's kind of like what you're going to end up finding.
Yeah.
But I do think that that is kind of connected in like some kind of weird, strange ways. Like, I don't know, I have different thoughts on what the paranormal actually is and like what ghost, what people report as ghost actually are. I think that it's a high possibility that some of it is like bilocation, that the people are actually alive, like they're real people that are alive, that are able to bilocate their essence into a silhouetted type of form. Because in remote viewing, there's a technique that Lynn Buchanan talks about that is essentially that. It's called perfect sight integration. So you go into your remote viewing state and you essentially bilocate into a different area wherever it is, and you can influence the environment. You can change the environment, and you can knock things over, move things. And what do people report with, poltergeist-like activity? That's the entity or whatever, and they're just making a ruckus, slamming doors, messing up the kitchen and stuff. And I'm like, well, that sounds more like a human being that's doing that to me.
Yeah, and you definitely have that with like astral travel too. I read this really cool book as a kid called "He Came to Set the Captives Free." Totally sidebar, and it's about this lady. I think Rebecca Brown wrote the book about this woman, and they changed the names. And I believe it was out of Illinois, and she had been raised in a satanic cult. And part of the thing is she became a high priestess in the occult, and she claims in the book that she was at one point like the number one high priestess in the world, that she had literally married Satan. And it's a really, really good book. I do encourage you to read it. I've read it a few times and it's pretty good. And she goes into the music industry and how they were called in to put curses over the music, and she really goes into a lot of stuff. And some of the stuff she talks about in there is astral travel and how she utilized it in the past to, knock things over. You can pick something up and write stuff on the walls. It was just depending on, what the situation was. But yeah. And as far as, Bigfoot and the paranormal, I think that there is more to it than it just being something strictly flesh and blood. And I mean, that's my opinion to it. I think that there is a supernatural element to it. And I think we, in our trying to rationalize it, I always say that, like, you can't put it in a box. I think you have to go where the evidence takes you, and you have to be open to what the evidence is telling you, and try not to put your own confirmation bias onto something or your own bias onto it. Because if someone comes, and that's one of the things, Paulides touches on too, which he never anticipated on, investigating the lights in the sky, but that is where the evidence took him when he was researching Bigfoot. And, I think it's just all about documenting it, compiling those data points. And I think that there is, my personal opinion, I think that there is a little bit of a supernatural twist to Bigfoot for sure, and cryptids in general.
Well, when you think about it, the paranormal and the supernatural things only tend to happen at night. Like, why is that? That's because people are sleeping. The majority of the population is asleep. So they could literally be dreaming and be in your area and, like, essentially bilocate to you, and you get a kind of a little glimpse of them in your awakened state. And if you experience something during the day, it's nighttime somewhere else in the world.
That's true. Okay? That is very true.
At all points during your time here, it's nighttime somewhere. So
someone's dreaming.
I wasn't going to ask this question, but I think it's kind of funny, and it kind of does make sense. Nutty Unhinged says, I don't mean to get too gross here, but wouldn't you think they would leave behind big amounts of poo-poo when they go number 2? So the question is, has anyone found any amounts of poo? Bigfoot poo. What do you know about the Bigfoot poo, Brooke? Tell us.
It's funny, actually, I know a little bit about it. So I personally have never come across any. Out in the woods, we do come across like bear or coyote or other animals. I personally have never come across any. I have heard of people, finding something just like super enormously large. There are some folks who said that they found some stuff and tested it. I don't know how much legitimacy is in those claims. There's some other folks that say that they kind of try to mask it. And so they go in a waterway and then like stir it. I don't know. I don't know where I
land. Febreze on it? Come on now.
Yeah. I don't know where I fall on that camp. I haven't thought too much about that one.
Get some Lysol spray out there in the woods and spray it.
Yeah.
Bigfoot poo. And I think that's where we're going to leave it off on, is Bigfoot poo here today. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed it, and let people know where they can find you online if they would like to listen to your podcast. Where can they listen to that at?
Yeah, absolutely. Dark Florida Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. I do have a YouTube, but Dark Florida 411, where I do post some videos every now and then and share the RSS feed there. Instagram, Dark Florida Podcast. Feel free to ask any questions. And then I'll also be at the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference on April 5th. I'll be part of the Skunk Ape Roundtable there. I'll be a participant, and we will get into all things, answer any questions that people may have, and I'd love to meet everybody. So please come out.
The links to Brooke's information is in the description of this video. Go over there and support her. And thanks so much to everyone for being here. Really appreciate you guys. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And we'll see you guys next time. Stay with me, Brooke.